Sup gamers? So recently I was interviewed by the fake Bennett about my thoughts on Deathslinger and the state of the game for Dead by Daylight, and I said that I think that Dead by Daylight is generally in a good spot until I played these games, which were going to be for a commentary video that was going to come out today. That really made me realize what actually is the most difficult about playing Dead by Daylight as a content creator, and that is specifically that this game has peak hours, which is a bit of a weird thing to say, but if you're not playing for your region specifically in the hours where after 5 to 6 p.m., generally speaking, the mix of matches that you get tend to be pretty rancid in quality and don't typically make for good videos. So for example, in this first game, I took forever to find the survivors on Gideon Meat Plant. Down coming at the cost of 2 gens. And even though we do have Surge, just not going to have a lot of the presence necessary. The good news is that most of our gens are downstairs. And when I eventually did find them, I missed a couple of shots, I hit a couple of shots, but these survivors were very clearly coordinated and knew how to play against Deathslinger because this Nicolas Cage would pre-run and pre-leave me all the time, as would pretty much everyone else on the team, aside from this poor Sable that I ended up killing eventually. But the strategy of pre-dropping was used pretty heavily here because we were on the Gideon Meat Plant, we were on the game. Now, as the game wound down, I was playing my favorite build, which has Coup de Grace, Rapid Brutality, Surge, and Gearhead for information. And in this game, as it wound down and got down to the final gen, there were 2 gens that were very close to each other, one downstairs and one upstairs. And because I had Surge, every time that I got a down, I would be able to blow both of the gens up simultaneously and keep setting back the progress. But the funny thing was, every time that I actually got a hit onto a survivor, they would leave. They would go off to a different corner of the map, reset, but then they wouldn't come back until they knew that my terror radius was a safe distance away. One of the characters as well, the Orella, had Overcome and Lucky Break, and in this kind of indoor map where you can easily break line of sight, that was extremely aggravating to play against and ended up contributing a lot to the team being able to get down to 1 gen. I eventually ended up holding this 3 gen for so long against people that I just went ahead and abandoned the match because it had crossed 10 minutes and honestly didn't make for very good commentary because a lot of it was just, where are the survivors? Oh, they're pre-running and pre-leaving and dropping all the pallets and I'm not able to catch any of them off guard because they're likely on comms together. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it was a very stressful first match to get back into to play the Gideon Meat Plant, and I was seriously considering not including the game in the video because it didn't have great commentary. It went on for 18 minutes, 10 of which no gens were completed. I didn't get really any downs, and everyone was pre-running and pre-leaving on Gideon Meat Plant, one of the most boring locations to play on. And so I thought, you know what, this is just one weird specific instance. But then I went into another match on the Dead Dog Saloon, and in this game as well, I could not find survivors for the life of me, and would be missing extremely weird shots, and also had my hit rejected on one of them. That's really funny. I actually hit that. You can tell that the hit was rejected because the sound still goes through, even though it looks like I shouldn't have hit that. And on top of that, Deathslinger also happens to have a cooldown where if he has a successful hit after an M1, there's a 1-second delay before he can reload again. But if he misses the shot and has to reload back in, he has a 1.5-second delay before he can reload again. So hitting your shots, on that hit, I recognized that I actually had that half-second faster reload because the game had registered as a hit, but I wasn't able to pull the Cheryl and buy myself that bit of time that I needed in the early game, and because of the weirdness of the rest of the game, everything fell apart. From here, the survivors were extremely altruistic, aside from the temp named Jane, who left immediately as soon as she saw that the gate was open. And I ended up still getting a 2K because I somehow managed to keep the Cheryl and the Claudette in the game until the endgame collapse came through. And that, again, wasn't a very fun match to showcase just because of how everything ended up unfolding, and I felt like it wasn't a very good showcase of my skills. Although I did have a couple of nice hits. I had this one really nice long-range one onto the Claudette, and then I had this other great one that went through the railings inside a main on the Dead Dog main, which, you know, There are things that you can do with that. Actually, I had two of them. There was one on the outside railing as well, where this Cheryl thought she was safe to be mending behind the railing, and I taught her a lesson real quick. But this is the second game in a row that I felt wasn't particularly great for commentary. And I was starting to get a little bit annoyed because now I have two games that just weren't all that great to showcase and weren't all that great to put into the video. And so I went in thinking, okay, the third match will be fine. Third match, we get probably my least favorite Autohaven map, the Azeroth's Resting Place. It's shaped like a dumbbell, and you usually get a 3-gen on one side, and that's what you have to defend as killer. You just defend one half of the map because it has a 3-gen on it, and it's super boring. It gets really boring to play, to just be like, okay, if I want to win this match, I have to hold a 3-gen. Which, in some ways, yeah, that is what you have to do as killer, and I had done that on the Gideon Meat Plant game, but I felt like the Gideon Meat Plant game was a bit more incidental, whereas Azeroth's happens to be every game that you play on Azeroth's Resting Place, you have to hold a 3-gen, otherwise that map just falls apart completely. It's just the way of the killer. However, in this game, I got another hit denial. I hit him! I hit him, video game! Please! Dead by Daylight, please. I need you to stop giving me this fucking bug. I don't know how this is still a bug. I don't know the consistency or the reason why this even happens. You can see all my PC specs on my Steam or on my Twitch profile. I don't have like a bad PC. I don't have bad internet. I don't know why I have hit rejection here. This has been a bug ever since the Blood Moon event, and that's like that's beyond the point of the problem that I have with DBD, but specifically that I got to this point where I found survivors on generators pretty early because of course I heard the repairing of generators, but I turned the corner and looked around for them, could not find a single soul anywhere. I couldn't find them around the corner. I assumed they were probably running fixated and were able to hide in locations. I was checking lockers. I was trying to really actively engage in chases, but I was getting stealthed on the whole game. And when I did eventually find an Ada, I didn't want to tunnel her out because I wanted to try encourage more chases with the rest of the squad, but they played really well. They split the map up fine and were in good comms, and even if I was able to try and make my way across the map, by the time that I would have reached a generator that had a ton of progress on it, the team would have walked away and hid themselves immediately. And so because I wasn't even able to get hits, I wasn't getting any procs of Gearhead, and even if I did get procs of Gearhead, they were probably on a gen on the other side of the map because I was forced to defend 3-gen on Azeroth's Resting Place. Which I guess kind of goes into the conversation of how the problem that I really have with Dead by Daylight is that the maps are so terribly imbalanced. If there was actually a massive map overhaul to make them a bit more unilateral across both sides, because Killer has obviously some maps that heavily bias them. Underground Complex is a really small map that killers typically do really well on because of its confusing layout. It's really easy to play around pallets, and it's generally, well, small size. Versus things like Bad M Preschool, which is a massive map that has a lot of guaranteed safe pallets and a really good main building and also a good outer building with the Quentin House that makes it really tough to play around as well. And I think that if there was a bit more of like a unilateral fix in terms of the maps to make them less aggravating to play on both sides, it would be glorious. It would be wonderful. It would fix a lot of the problems that I have. But this game as well, in this Azeroth's match, I just couldn't play. I just couldn't make this into a recording because, again, I was defending a 3-gen. I didn't see survivors all game until I saw them like twice, and then I ended up with a 1k because the Steve that I got gave up on Hook and his 3 buddies just left immediately because they're like, yeah, just get out. It's a 3-man out. We'll be fine getting a win. Which, fair play to the survivors, they played this game extremely well, but also, to have these matches all extremely back-to-back-to-back while I'm recording at 4 p.m. on a Sunday feels really crappy. And it's the problem that I have just in general with Dead by Daylight is that your peak hours are usually later in the evening, and those later in the evening hours are usually the hours that I want to stream, but obviously YouTube doesn't like it when people pull games from their stream to put onto their dedicated YouTube channel, so I have to try and find a balance there, and I've just not really been able to do that, along with the bugs, along with some of the maps feeling really miserable to play. After the Azerov's Resting Place game, I was like, okay, I consider maybe one of these games a wash. Maybe I considered the Dead Dog a wash because I didn't expect there to be the last Boonbender and the temp name having Sprint Burst lightweight, where I couldn't even see her scratch marks and she just zoomed away off the hook. And so I played one more game, and I played it on the Forgotten Ruins. And this one actually ended up going really well in my favor, but also it went really well in my favor because the survivors kept running into me, which is a complete polar opposite of the gameplay style that had preceded this 3 games in a row before it. I had completely swung the pendulum the other way from these groups of highly coordinated, really good survivors on ARP, or highly coordinated survivors, or at least partially coordinated survivors on Dead Dog that I miraculously got a 2k out of, or these coordinated survivors that were on the game, to the point where the game went out for so long that I had to abandon, to now these less experienced survivors, one of which was trying to get her adept on Aurella on Forgotten Ruins on one of the most killer-sided maps, and that was the game that I played well because they were less experienced against me. Now, I understand that there are sometimes some games that I run into, and actually frequent games that I run into, where the survivors are extremely inexperienced, but I like having a nice blend so that sometimes I get that reality check. Excuse me for the burp. And when I'm not offered that reality check, when I'm not offered that kind of variance, playing Dead by Daylight becomes so much worse to play. And I do think that, unfortunately, it is off the back of the queues being split between 2v8 and normal queues right now, where all of the survivors that are mediocre to good at the game are all playing 2v8 for the bonus BP, and the survivors that are either brand new to the game and intimidated by 2v8, or who are really, really good at the game and don't want to concern themselves with casual game modes, are in the normal queues now. And so you don't have this kind of middle ground of survivors in between where you're playing something goofy, you're playing something off meta, you're playing something to chill with. It just ends up falling apart entirely because now you have these massively different skill ratings that fluctuate in between games, and they either feel boring or feel like you can do absolutely nothing in them. And that's why I'm just not a big fan of making Dead by Daylight commentary right now. So yeah, in case you're wondering where I've been, I've genuinely been trying to make recording commentaries for this game, but it's been pretty darn difficult to do lately. And the fact that YouTube also didn't put my last video of me just playing against Ghostface in 2v8 into sub boxes, and that video went literally nowhere because YouTube hates me right now, it feels really bad. So yeah, that sucks. Anyway, enough rambling. I'm gonna end the video now. Bye-bye.